It's often said you birth the way you live, and that is why I suggest to prepare for birth to have a daily pleasure practice and to join us to positively prepare for birth. There are many life skills that help you prepare for a gentle birth. Yoga, breathwork, meditation, mantras, relaxation. And our guest today will share her two powerful home birth stories and how she prepared and experienced the initiatory power of birth. Hi, I'm Deborah Pascali-Bonaro, founder and director of Orgasmic Birth and host of the Orgasmic Birth podcast. My guest today is Dawn Leonard. Dawn has been on a path of healing her womb space, her physical uterus, and the energetics of the second chakra for over 10 years. It began with fertility and has led her through pregnancy, birth, loss, menstruation, ceremony, energy healing, and the initiatory experiences built into the body of a woman or a person with a uterus. Now, as a woman's wellness educator, she cares deeply about leading people with a uterus into understanding and positive relationships with their feminine cyclical nature. Through her work as a perinatal yoga teacher, childbirth educator, and energy healer, she is creating a community of people who are growing into positive, balanced relationships with their bodies and each other. And I remember, Dawn, first reading your two birth stories that are posted on our Orgasmic Birth blog and seeing you in labor and birth. Your beautiful photos and stories just truly filled me with tears, with awes, and your insights, the way you expressed your feelings for each of your births, provides such wisdom that I know our listeners will appreciate too. So thank you for joining me today, Dawn.
Thank you, Deborah. Thank you for having me.
It is such a pleasure. And I'm sure everyone listening is as excited as I am to hear a little bit about your journey with birth. Do you think you could give us an overview of getting pregnant and your first two births?
Yeah. Well, my fertility story is always kind of an inspiration, but also sometimes a challenge to talk about. And I've gotten used to sharing the experience of learning what it means to listen to our intuition and to really speak what our truth is. So when my husband and I were trying to get pregnant, we had already been married for, I think, 5 years. And then we were trying to get pregnant for like a year and a half. And I did all of the things, that I could do, that before going to the doctor, right? And then I went to the OB and they're like, yeah, we could do fertility treatments. And I was like, no, I'm not really interested in like hormonal things, drugs, all that kind of stuff. So I went to my Chinese medicine practitioner, my acupuncturist. And so through working with her, we did a lot of Chinese herbs, and Chinese herbs and acupuncture are amazing, and they really support fertility in so many ways. I know a lot of people have gotten pregnant through the process of TCM. Well, so we fixed everything physically in my body, but I still wasn't getting pregnant. And so at this point also, I had already had a yoga practice for many years, and I was doing some yin yoga, which is really slow. One aspect of it is about like really stretching and being, getting super flexible. But another aspect of yin yoga is just staying in positions for a really long time. And that's a really reflective space. And so it's a real good opportunity for us to listen to our intuition. And so as I was doing that yin yoga practice, and I'm also a big dreamer. So I listened to my dreams a lot, or I recorded my dreams. And there were some big dreams and some big insights from my yoga practice. And the thing that always stands out is this dream of a horse like riding the ocean waves. And to me, everybody's dreams are personal, and their meaning is personal. And so for me, that was, you're using a lot of willpower to keep what's your conscious, like what's subconscious, like the ocean is the subconscious. You're using a lot of willpower to keep that down. And what my subconscious was trying to tell me, and the things that I was hearing, were about my sexuality. And so then, through the support of an amazing friend and the support of my husband, who's willing to listen to things that are even uncomfortable, we had conversations. And it just what came forward was like, I'm interested in sex with women. And that had always been really taboo. And it was really uncomfortable for me to say. But the magic was, and I didn't realize it at the moment, that was when I said that to my husband and my friend, that was the month that I got pregnant. And so all the support around me, the physical stuff was there and ready, but it was the emotional and energetic thing that needed to come through, and I got pregnant. So my first pregnancy was really great. It was easy. I loved being pregnant. I felt this whole goddessy thing. And I knew I wanted to have a home birth. I don't know why. My midwife asked me, why do you want to have a home birth? And I was like, I don't know. I like organic gardening. Like, I just knew. I knew that I felt safe. I knew that I felt that it was the right thing for me. And, of course, plenty of people had their doubts and shared things, but not like, didn't overly share their fears or anything. And so I hired a midwife, and we had an amazing birth experience. My first pregnancy and birth, we just had one midwife and her assistant and my husband. And I have one photograph from that labor and birth, which is a beautiful photograph. And so the labor itself was pretty straightforward. I had a birth tub, which I was happy to be in. And I was in and out of it. Labor progressed sort of normally. But I remember a moment, there's like a couple of key moments during this birth. I was in the tub, and I had a vision of a man, an adult man who had a Jewish nose like my father and big curly hair like my husband. And I just had that like flash of an image. I didn't respond to it. I didn't like process it in the moment. I just had that image. And I think that happened during transition. So like first stage labor was straightforward, but then I pushed and I pushed and I pushed and I pushed. I pushed for about 3 hours. And I think ultimately there was some like pelvic imbalance that was contributed to that, which happened in my second labor as well. But so I had been pushing for a long time, and the midwife said, why don't you get up and go to the bathroom? Because we were in my bed. And she said, I'll let you go to the bathroom and have your privacy. And I just thought that was so funny. I was like, privacy? My legs are spread, like you're looking at my vagina for the last hour, 2 hours. Like, what do I need privacy for? But it was useful. So I got up and I walked to the bathroom, and I didn't even make it to the toilet. I got to the sink, and I just had this huge wave. I had that sound that came up that was just really primal. Being at home, I had the windows open, and I remember like I was screaming, or like it was a loud sound, and I was thinking, are my neighbors hearing me? But I got to the sink, and I made that just like primal sound, and I was like holding onto the sink really hard, and I yelled, the baby's coming. And so the midwives came into the bathroom, and my husband was standing in the bathroom with me. And as I was standing there, sort of semi-squatting, stand squatting, holding onto the sink. In yoga, we call it like the kitchen sink stretch. And before he emerged, I said, "It's a boy." Just, instinctually, it came out of my mouth. I didn't think about it. And then I felt the ring of fire. And that was intense. And then I looked down, and as his head came out, full head of dark brown hair, and there's the testicles. And then she handed him to me up through my legs, and I held him, I carried him, and then I walked back to the bedroom and sat down, and I was like, oh my God, it's a boy. And because I thought I had wanted a girl, I was like planning for a girl. We only had girls' names. So I was a little bit shell-shocked from just the fact it was a boy, but everything else was like amazing and beautiful. So there was a little bit of like incongruence, I think, in that moment of just that not being prepared for, oh, it's a boy. I grew up with all girls. I'm friends with a lot of girls. Like I didn't know what to do with the boy, and he's kind of been throwing me curveballs his whole life, and he's 9 now. So that was my first birth story of my older son, James.
What beautiful wisdom. I have to just say, Dawn, from your, fertility journey and all the ways, body, mind, spirit, that you approach that. And then even in, you brought that into your birth, knowing just so deeply where you wanted to give birth and just trusting that wisdom. That's a huge feat. I hope listeners, you're really taking that in, because I think so often people may have an intuition, but don't trust it. So it's so beautiful to hear that in you in every way. So take us on now.
Yeah.
Like, when you were considering getting pregnant again, what was that journey like for you and that preparation?
Well, can I say something about intuition first?
Yes.
This is really one of the biggest things that I love teaching people about, or how to access, in my prenatal yoga classes. Intuition, it's one thing, like there's levels of it. One, we have to learn how to listen to our intuition. What does it sound like? What's the difference between intuition and fear? And then it's one thing to hear our intuition, but like you said, the magic happens when you follow through and you listen to your intuition. And that's actually harder for most people, is to really follow through with what their intuition says, because a lot of times it's really scary and it's not what we want to hear. But so yeah, I love the intuition is a big part of what I like to teach and practice in prenatal yoga in my childbirth class.
Thank you.
Yeah. So with my second one, it was, so in the process, like I was like, this birth was amazing. I want to help other people do this. So I trained to be a doula. I got my prenatal yoga certification. And I was also training with a Reiki master. And so I had my Reiki 1, maybe Reiki 2, what do they call them? Attunements. And so I was practicing on my husband, and I'm pretty sure that it was, so we weren't really actively trying. I thought that I was going to need more herbs or like Chinese medicine or something. I thought that I was going to need preparation, but we were actually at a point where we were like, neither of us had like really consistent income, and we just weren't sure where we weren't really stable. But I was practicing Reiki on my husband, and I saw white doves fly out, and I don't know, there wasn't anything specific, but I just like, I got pregnant that month. And we were kind of unstable, like I said, but actually, and so I got pregnant in October, November. And in January, he was offered a full-time job, and like everything just really settled into place after that. And then it was like, well, I know how to, this is going to be, on the one hand, there's like an opportunity for repair, because I was like, well, I wanted to birth in the tub, and why didn't I get to birth in the tub? Maybe this time I'll get to have a water birth. And what I came to understand afterwards is that the birth tub was not stable enough for me. I needed something solid to stand on. I needed to stand up to birth, and the tub wasn't strong enough for me because it was an inflatable tub. And so it was a very similar experience, except that I was super supported. I had a midwife's assistant, a doula, a photographer who is also a Reiki practitioner, my husband, my mother-in-law, who was our sibling doula, and my son, who was 5 at the time. So it was like a party in the house. And yeah, labor went smooth normally. So I got to pushing. I pushed for 3.5 hours again. And same thing sort of happened. Like, I had to be in the bathroom. I was sitting over for a while, I was straddling the toilet backwards, and the midwives had kind of left me alone. And then they heard that like, growl. And they were like, I learned this after the fact, but like, they said, oh, that's the sound that we're looking for. And so I stood up, I held onto the sink next to the tub or the toilet, and I did one more push, and the midwife said, oh, the baby's head's out now, you just need one more push. And I was like, oh, I didn't feel the ring of fire that time. And so I reached down and I felt his head, and then, she caught him and she handed him to me, and I sat down and I looked again. We didn't check. We didn't know what the sex was beforehand, but it was another boy. And this time I was really happy about it. And so that was like my positive reparative experience. Like, I was so happy to have a second boy, and just the energy, I was just really blissful after that one. I mean, I sat down on the toilet, I was holding him, and I looked up and I just felt, sweat and tears and snot all running down my face, but it was all perfect. It was all so good. And I have lots of pictures of that birth.
Yes, and those pictures are just stunning. So
yes.
Knowing that you had such a team, a community around you, you have a glow. And I'm sure you had that in the first one. We just don't have those images, but
yeah,
it's so beautiful.
Thank you. Yeah. And my photographer, I have to give credit, was Katie Klein. So she's in my local area in Greensboro.
Oh, thank you, Katie.
Yeah.
So I know in all your preparation, and you did mention it in some things that you wrote, and I wanted to just ask you, do you feel there's a connection between what you need to feel safe in birth and for healthy sexuality?
Yes. Well, as you talk about, birth is sexual, and both of these things, really, the intimacy requires safety. And I talk about safety in terms of the nervous system, right? It's a big buzz right now, the nervous system and trauma. And because actually a lot of people are doing some really amazing trauma healing work through the nervous system. But it's the nervous system, it's a body up experience of safety, right? We can tell ourselves that we feel safe, but it's the body that's really responding to previous, like, habitual things. And that might be anxiety, or it might be from previous trauma. but it's about learning how to feel safe in our bodies. And when we feel safe in our bodies, yeah, we can birth easily, and sex is a lot more expansive, right? So when we have, I don't want to get into too much like technical language, but when there's not too much fight, or there's not too much freeze or collapse, that's when we feel safe and good. And that's where we can experience pleasure. And when there's more, we call it the window of tolerance. When that window of tolerance is bigger, the bigger that window, the more pleasure we can experience. And so safety is sort of a prerequisite to pleasure.
Well said. Thank you so much for sharing that and talking about how much there is the ability to heal trauma too. We've been talking about that in other episodes, and I think it's always important to bring that in. You also say that birth is an initiation, and it requires supported preparation, space holding, and integration. Can you talk more about that?
Yes, I love that birth is initiation, and actually women's bodies are primed for several initiatory experiences. Our physiology enables us to, just by growing as like physiologically, we are capable of having these initiations. And so the first one is menarche. When we first start bleeding, that's an initiation. And actually every single month when we bleed, when it's a true period that's not altered by chemical hormones, right? When it's a true period, that is really an initiatory experience as well. So every month we can prepare little by little, step by step, titrated for this huge initiatory experience of birth. But there is a lot of what we feel like are initiations going on right now, I think, in like ceremony. And a lot of the idea of ceremony is, say, like ayahuasca or magic mushrooms, right? But in order to have a truly spiritual or like healing initiatory experience, we need to be prepared for what that experience is going to be about. And so we have to prepare for birth through the childbirth classes, but also through life, right? Through conscious awareness of menstruation, through conscious awareness of our bodies. There's many ways that we can prepare for the initiation. And in that preparation, we get to understand, here is the doorway that is being opened to me. And then in the initiation itself, in the process of birth and labor and birth, we're going deeper and deeper. We can go deeper and deeper into states of expanded consciousness, right? And that is where we access the initiation, the change, the shift, the thing that makes us, transforms us from the thing we were before to what is to come. And that is birth. And then again, it's not done just at that moment. We have to integrate that experience. We have to process it. We have to be supported in understanding. I mean, there's that moment of change, but it ripples out slowly, and we need to be supported in that aspect of it too. So that's the fourth trimester, where we really need to be supported in understanding how we have changed. What was the experience that I just went through? And a lot of times I think that in spiritual experiences, if you don't say out loud what it is you experience, it's like it didn't happen. But when you say it, that's what makes it real. That was my experience. This is what is real for me, right? That's part of the processing afterwards, after the initiation. So I think all three aspects of that are really important in birth.
I couldn't agree with you more. And I love how you brought that together, because I think we don't talk about it enough. We think about birth in kind of our current paradigm as just a day and not really the process. And as you say, the initiation, I used to call it the rite of passage, that it is a significant life event and really, calls us into these altered states. So is there one last thing that you'd like to share for listeners who are either pregnant or considering getting pregnant? What would be your last nugget that you would like to leave them with?
Oh, I think we should leave them with the thing that you very first started out with, which is that you birth the way you live. So be conscious of, how you are living right now, and allow those ripples to move you into healing, or your meditation practice, or whatever it is that allows you to feel good and safe and pleasure in the process of birth.
Thank you so much, Dawn. And I know that people would love to be able to reach out to you, learn more about what you're doing and following you. Can you share where they can contact you?
Yeah. I'm pretty active on Instagram. My handle is Sri Dawn, SRI Dawn. And my website, my business is called Sacred Rhythms. So the website is sacred-rhythms.com. And I'd love to have you get on my email list. I have a free birth prep checklist, and I have some free meditations on my website. So yeah, check out my website.
Thank you so much. And I hope that everyone will go ahead and check out Dawn's website, follow her on Instagram, and maybe tag us both. We'd love to know what your favorite takeaway is. How are you going to integrate Dawn's experience and wisdom into your preparation and planning? So we wish you all a pleasurable day, and hope that you'll join us next time for another episode of the Orgasmic Birth Podcast. Thank you.
Thank you, Deborah.